The wind howled through the empty streets as Daniel, a retired war veteran, trudged home from his night walk, alone, again. But when a stray German shepherd began following him, stopping every few steps to look back as if signaling something, Daniel's instincts told him this wasn't random. The dog's eyes gleamed with urgency, almost pleading. Against his better judgment, Daniel followed, and soon found himself standing before a decaying mansion glowing faintly in the mist. One window flickered with light, another slammed shut on its own. "What are you trying to show me, boy?" he whispered. The dog's ears perked, tail low, and then came the sound, a faint cry for help from inside. "Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel." The evening air was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of pine and rain-soaked earth. Daniel Walker adjusted the collar of his worn flannel jacket as he walked down the empty suburban road, his boots crunching softly against scattered leaves. The world around him felt silent, too silent. Every night was the same route, the same quiet, and the same emptiness that trailed behind him like a ghost he couldn't outrun. Once, Daniel had thrived in the chaos of the battlefield. He'd been a Marine, calm under fire, the kind of man others looked to when everything went wrong. But now there were no missions, no radio calls, no brothers in arms, only memories that refused to die. Every corner of his small town seemed to whisper reminders of what he'd lost. His wife Claire had left 2 years after his discharge, unable to bear the sleepless nights and his haunted silence. Their son Tyler had moved away for college, calling less and less as time went by. And the hardest loss of all, his K9 partner Rex, a loyal German shepherd who had saved Daniel's life more than once, had died in his arms during their final deployment. That was the day Daniel stopped believing in second chances. He'd tried to rebuild, therapy sessions, veterans groups, even church. But nothing filled the hollow ache inside. So he walked, every night without fail. It was the only thing that kept his thoughts from devouring him whole. That night, however, something felt different. The wind carried an uneasy stillness, and the fog rolled in thicker than usual. Streetlights flickered, stretching his shadow across the cracked pavement. He glanced up at the sky, muttering, "Guess it's just you and me again." "Old man." His voice sounded foreign, almost fragile. But somewhere ahead, faintly beyond the mist, a soft sound broke the rhythm of his lonely steps, a bark. Not distant, not aggressive, just one sharp call that froze him mid-stride. Daniel frowned, his instincts suddenly alert. He scanned the fog. There it was again, a bark, then silence. He couldn't explain why, but something inside him stirred, something that hadn't awakened in years. Daniel slowed his pace, peering into the veil of fog that blanketed the empty street. The faint barking came again, closer this time. His pulse quickened as a shape began to emerge from the mist. A lone German shepherd stepped into the dim glow of the streetlight, its fur matted and damp, ribs faintly visible beneath a weathered coat. The dog stood still, its head tilted slightly, amber eyes locked on Daniel as though it had been waiting for him all along. "Hey, buddy." Daniel's voice softened, instinctively calm the way he used to speak to Rex. He crouched down slowly, extending a hand. The dog didn't move. Instead, it let out a low whine, tail flicking once before it took a few steps backward. It wasn't afraid, it was cautious. And there was something intelligent, almost knowing in the way it studied him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the remains of a granola bar. "You hungry?" he asked quietly, placing the food on the ground. The shepherd glanced at it but didn't approach. Instead, it looked at Daniel again, then turned its head toward the end of the street, letting out a short, deliberate bark. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" The dog barked again, louder this time, and began walking slowly down the road. After a few steps, it stopped, looked back at him, and barked once more, as if signaling him to follow. Daniel chuckled uneasily. "What are you trying to show me, boy?" He glanced around, half expecting someone else to appear, but the night was empty. The air grew colder, and for reasons he couldn't explain, his gut urged him not to ignore the animal. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, I'll bite. Lead the way." The shepherd wagged its tail once, then trotted ahead, vanishing into the fog. Daniel followed, his footsteps echoing softly through the still night. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking alone, and though he didn't yet know why, he could feel it deep down. This dog had found him for a reason. Daniel followed the stray's silhouette as it disappeared deeper into the fog, his boots crunching softly against damp gravel. The night had grown unnaturally quiet. No wind, no crickets, no hum of passing cars. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the ears, heavy and strange. Every instinct in him said to turn back, but another part, the soldier in him, whispered to keep going. "All right, boy," he muttered, his breath forming faint clouds in the chill air. "You've got my attention." The shepherd stayed a few paces ahead, occasionally glancing back to make sure Daniel was following. The dog's movements were precise, almost purposeful, not the random wandering of a stray. It wove through narrow paths Daniel didn't even know existed, as if retracing steps it had taken before. They crossed the edge of town, past the last flickering streetlight, and into the woods. Moonlight filtered weakly through the trees, painting the world in shades of blue and silver. The mist thickened, curling low over the ground. Daniel could feel moisture settling on his skin. Each breath felt heavier, each step more uncertain. "Where are you taking me?" he whispered. The shepherd paused, ears twitching, then barked once, a sharp echoing sound that bounced off the trees. Far ahead, faint and almost hidden, Daniel noticed a dull orange glow cutting through the fog. It looked like light from a window, though no house should have been out here. His heart thudded once hard. "You've got to be kidding me," he murmured, tightening his jacket as the temperature seemed to drop another degree. The dog trotted ahead confidently. Daniel hesitated for one last moment, glancing back toward the empty road behind him. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped forward into the unknown, following the only living soul that had sought him out in years. The deeper Daniel followed, the thicker the fog became until the world around him turned into shifting shadows and ghostly light. The German shepherd's form was now just a dark outline moving ahead, its fur glistening faintly under the moon's pale glow. Then, through the haze, Daniel saw it, a massive silhouette rising from the ground like a memory of another time. The mansion stood at the heart of a clearing, cloaked in ivy and age. Its tall windows were clouded with dust, yet faint orange light flickered behind one of them like a candle fighting to stay alive. A chill raced down Daniel's spine. "What in God's name?" he whispered, tightening his fists. The shepherd stopped at the edge of the overgrown path leading to the front steps. It turned, eyes glinting, tail low but steady. Daniel stepped closer, his boots sinking into damp soil. The air was heavy with the scent of wet wood and decay. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, and a door creaked faintly in reply. He paused at the bottom of the stone stairs, staring up at the towering structure. The front door was half open, light spilling out in a soft golden hue as if the house itself were breathing. The glow was warm, almost inviting, but everything else screamed danger. Daniel took a slow step forward. The dog growled low, not at him, but at the darkness within. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and for a fleeting moment, Daniel thought he saw a shadow move across the second-floor window. "Looks like someone's home," he muttered under his breath. The shepherd barked once, sharply, and walked ahead, disappearing through the open door. Daniel exhaled, his heart pounding. Against every instinct he'd ever trusted, he followed the dog inside. The floorboards groaned beneath Daniel's boots as he stepped into the mansion. Dust motes swirled in the faint glow of candlelight, and the air felt heavy, thick with the scent of old wood, mildew, and something else. Memory. The German shepherd padded ahead quietly, its nails clicking softly against the floor. The place was larger inside than it looked from outside, every corner cloaked in shadow, every wall lined with forgotten history. Daniel's flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, revealing ornate portraits draped in cobwebs. Most faces were stern, unfamiliar, but one painting stopped him cold. It showed a man in an old military uniform, broad-shouldered, proud, with eyes that carried the same weary depth Daniel saw in his own reflection. He moved closer, brushing away layers of dust from the frame. "This can't be right," he muttered. The nameplate beneath the portrait read, "Captain Elias Monroe, 1943. The dog whined softly and pawed at the wooden floor beneath the portrait, claws scraping insistently. Daniel frowned. "What is it, boy?" He crouched down and tapped the boards. The sound was hollow. Something was hidden there. He pushed aside a faded rug and found faint markings carved into the wood, old, deliberate, almost like coordinates. Daniel's heart skipped. His years in the military had taught him to recognize coded engravings. Whoever had lived here had something to hide. Suddenly, a soft thump echoed from the far end of the hallway. Daniel froze. The shepherd's ears shot up, tail rigid, body tense. He aimed his flashlight toward the noise. A door at the corridor's end rocked slightly on its hinges, though no wind stirred the air. Daniel's pulse quickened. "All right, Monroe," he whispered to the painting, his voice low and steady. "What the hell were you hiding in here?" The shepherd let out a low growl and took the lead once more, guiding him toward the sound that would draw them deeper into the mansion's haunting truth. The silence inside the mansion was so thick Daniel could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. He swept his flashlight slowly across the hallway. Nothing moved, yet the faint thud he'd heard moments ago hadn't been his imagination. Somewhere above them, old wood creaked under the weight of unseen steps. The German shepherd stiffened, ears perked, gaze fixed on the staircase ahead. A chill rippled through Daniel's spine. "You hear that too, huh?" he murmured. The dog responded with a low growl that faded into a whine. The staircase loomed before them, its banister cracked, carpet frayed and colorless with age. Daniel hesitated. His combat instinct screamed caution. Never move toward the sound before confirming what it is. But curiosity, stronger than fear, tugged him upward. He adjusted his flashlight, its beam slicing through the dust and revealing handprints smeared faintly along the wall. Fresh ones. Each step groaned beneath his boots. The shepherd moved silently ahead, shoulders low, tail steady. When they reached the landing, Daniel froze. At the end of the corridor, a door creaked open slowly on its own. Light flickered from inside, dim, orange, uneven, like a candle struggling to stay alive. Daniel's throat went dry. "If this is some prank, it's not funny," he muttered, though the house offered no answer. The dog barked once, sharp and protective, before darting forward. Daniel followed, his pulse hammering. He reached the door and pushed it open wider. The hinges shrieked in protest. Inside was a bedroom untouched by time yet thick with a strange energy. On the dresser sat a candle still burning, wax pooled and dripping onto yellowed papers. The air felt colder here, unnaturally cold. Daniel stepped closer, scanning the room. The candle flickered violently, and for just a heartbeat he saw it, a faint reflection in the cracked mirror. A man's silhouette standing right behind him. He spun around. The room was empty. Daniel's breath came out shaky as he scanned the empty room. The candle's flame wavered, throwing restless shadows across the walls. The cracked mirror reflected only him and the German shepherd. But something about the air felt wrong, charged, alive, as if the mansion itself were holding its breath. On the desk beside the flickering candle lay a thick, dust-covered book. Its leather cover was cracked and brittle. The corners burned as though someone had tried to destroy it long ago. The word journal was faintly etched into the front. Daniel hesitated before brushing off the dust and opening it. The first page was dated 1943, the same year engraved under Captain Elias Monroe's portrait. His heart skipped. The handwriting was elegant but uneven, filled with the kind of pressure that came from guilt or fear. They told me the mission would be simple, but the price was more than I could bear. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He flipped through more pages. Each entry grew darker, descriptions of experiments, soldiers disappearing, and whispers of betrayal among the ranks. Monroe wrote about being stationed at a remote base, where something terrible had happened, something he could never speak of publicly. One passage caught Daniel's eye, scrawled hastily across the page. "The ghosts don't forgive. I see them even when I close my eyes. The dog comes at night, always leading me back to the house." Daniel's grip tightened. "The dog," he murmured, glancing at the shepherd beside him. The animal whined softly, pressing its head against Daniel's leg as if to confirm the connection. Then, at the final page, the ink smeared in a chaotic blur. Monroe's words trembled across the paper. "If anyone finds this, forgive me. The truth is buried beneath the house. The war never ended here. It only changed form." Before Daniel could turn the page, a sudden bang erupted from downstairs, like a door slamming shut with unnatural force. The shepherd barked wildly, hackles raised. They weren't alone anymore. The sound echoed through the mansion like thunder, rattling Daniel to his core. His flashlight trembled in his hand as the shepherd barked furiously toward the doorway, fur bristling. The slam hadn't come from the wind, there was intent behind it. Force. Something wanted them to stay. Daniel's military instincts took over. He moved to the door, pressing his back against the wall before peering into the dark hallway. "Easy, boy," he whispered, voice steady but low. "We stay sharp." The shepherd gave a short growl in reply, every muscle tense, ready. Then, out of the stillness, a sound cut through the air. Faint, fragile human, a cry. It wasn't a scream of fear, but one of pain, soft and trembling like someone whispering for help through layers of time. Daniel froze. The sound seemed to rise from beneath them. He aimed the flashlight at the floorboards, realizing the cries were coming from below. The dog whined, circling a spot near the far corner of the hallway. There, half hidden beneath a warped carpet, was a narrow hatch secured with rusted nails. Daniel knelt beside it, heart pounding. The air near the hatch was colder, unnaturally so. "You found this, didn't you?" he murmured to the shepherd. The dog barked once, pawing at the floor as if urging him to act. With effort, Daniel pried the nails loose one by one, the screech of metal echoing through the silent mansion. The cries grew clearer now, a woman's voice, faint but pleading. "Please, help me." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at the dog, who stared back with calm certainty, tail low, waiting. "All right," Daniel muttered, setting his jaw. "We're going down." He lifted the hatch open. A stale, icy draft poured out, smelling of earth, rust, and time. Below lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness, where the past waited to be found. The beam of Daniel's flashlight cut through the suffocating darkness as he descended the narrow staircase. Each step groaned under his weight, sending echoes spiraling into the cold void below. The shepherd followed close behind, its paws soundless but steady. The air grew damp, thick with the scent of earth and rusted metal. It didn't feel like a basement, it felt like a tomb. At the bottom, Daniel found himself standing in a cramped underground chamber. The walls were lined with old brick, cracked and blackened by age. A single rusted lantern hung from a nail, its glass shattered. In the corner stood a wooden table cluttered with relics of another time. Yellowed papers, faded photographs, and a small, dented box engraved with a symbol Daniel instantly recognized. His heart lurched. The insignia stamped into the metal was unmistakable, the emblem of his old Marine unit. He stepped closer, brushing his fingers across it, the cold metal stinging his skin. "No, that's impossible," he whispered. He turned to the photos scattered across the table. Most were ruined by moisture, but one remained intact. A black and white picture of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder. Daniel's throat tightened. There he was, his younger self, unmistakable, standing beside a man he hadn't seen in decades, Captain Elias Monroe. The shepherd whined, pawing gently at the ground. Beneath a loose board, Daniel noticed something glint. He pried it up and found a stack of letters tied together with a fraying string. The top one bore his name, for Sergeant Daniel Walker. A chill swept through him. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as the journal upstairs, Monroe's. "If you're reading this, it means the truth has finally found you. I never meant for you to carry my sins. What happened in 1999 wasn't your fault." Daniel's breath caught. 1999, he whispered. But Monroe had been dead since 1943. The walls suddenly groaned, dust raining down. The shepherd growled low. Time, it seemed, was folding in on itself. Daniel's hands trembled as he held the letter, the words swimming before his eyes. What happened in 1999 wasn't your fault. The phrase repeated in his mind like an echo he couldn't silence. He swallowed hard and kept reading. "I lied to protect myself. The mission, the one that cost so many lives, was never compromised by you, Daniel. It was me. I made the deal, and they made sure no one would ever find out. I built this house to bury the truth, but it followed me. It always does." Daniel lowered the letter, his pulse thundering in his ears. The same mission Monroe described, the ambush that had killed his entire unit, was the one that had ended Daniel's military career. He'd carried the guilt for decades, believing it was his mistake that led to their deaths. But now, this changed everything. He turned back to the table, tearing through the other envelopes, uncovering maps, mission logs, even coded transmissions, proof of Monroe's betrayal. "You destroyed me. Daniel whispered, anger and disbelief fighting for dominance in his voice. The shepherd whined softly, pressing its head against his arm. Daniel looked down at the dog's calm eyes, steady, knowing, grounding him in the storm of revelation. "You wanted me to see this, didn't you?" he said quietly. The air in the room seemed to shift. A sudden gust swept through the chamber, scattering the papers. The candlelight flickered violently, and from somewhere deeper in the darkness came the faint sound of a man's voice. A whisper, carried by the air itself. "I'm sorry, Daniel." Daniel froze. The sound wasn't in his head. It was real. He turned slowly toward the voice, his flashlight trembling in his hand. There on the far wall, the shadow of a man stood motionless, tall, uniformed, and unmistakably familiar. Captain Elias Monroe. Daniel's breath caught as the shadow sharpened against the brick wall, its form flickering like smoke caught in candlelight. For a moment, the old Marine thought his mind was playing tricks on him. Too many sleepless nights, too many ghosts from the past. But then the figure moved, slowly, deliberately. The German shepherd growled, low and deep, stepping in front of Daniel protectively. The spirit stood tall, its outline faint but clear. A man in a tattered uniform, medals gleaming faintly on his chest. Captain Elias Monroe. The same face from the portrait upstairs. The same man whose letter lay trembling in Daniel's hand. "Monroe," Daniel whispered, voice breaking between disbelief and anger. "Why now? Why show yourself to me?" The specter tilted its head slightly. A sorrowful expression etched across its pale, flickering features. Then it raised an unsteady hand and pointed, not at Daniel, but toward the far corner of the chamber. Daniel followed the gesture. Half buried in the dirt was a small object glinting faintly in the light. He moved closer, the shepherd beside him, still tense. As he knelt and brushed away the soil, his stomach twisted. It was a dog tag. Old, weathered, but unmistakably real. The name stamped into the metal made his heart stop. Rex, his canine partner. His best friend. The dog who had died saving him on that doomed mission years ago. Daniel's throat tightened. You led me back to him," he said softly, his voice breaking. The shepherd beside him whined as if recognizing the name. The spirit's glow dimmed and Monroe lowered his head in silent repentance. Then, with a final heavy glance toward Daniel, he mouthed a single word. "Forgive." A rush of cold air swept through the room, snuffing out the candle. When the light flickered back from Daniel's flashlight, the spirit was gone. Only the silence of peace remained. Daniel stared at the old dog tag in his trembling hand, the metal cold as ice against his skin. The faint engraving, Rex, seemed to pulse in the dim light as if carrying the heartbeat of a ghost. The German shepherd beside him sat still now, gaze fixed on Daniel with an intensity that went beyond understanding. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then it hit him. The way the dog had found him. The familiar intelligence in its eyes. The instinctive trust he'd felt from the very first bark. "No," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "That's not possible." He knelt, holding the tag closer to the shepherd's neck. Beneath the dirt and tangled fur, another tag hung loosely from a worn collar, its letters barely visible under the grime. Daniel wiped it clean and his chest constricted, Rex too. Tears welled in his eyes. You came back, didn't you?" he said softly, almost to himself. "You led me here." The dog tilted its head, tail giving one gentle wag as if answering. The air in the chamber shifted, warm now, gentle. Daniel looked up toward the spot where Monroe's spirit had stood moments earlier. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, only peace. The ghosts of his past had finally spoken, and his loyal partner had guided him to the truth. He placed the original tag beside the new one, whispering, "You were never gone, boy. You just had one more mission left." The shepherd pressed its head against his chest, eyes closing. Daniel wrapped his arms around the dog, the weight of years of guilt and loss finally breaking free. For the first time since the war, Daniel smiled through tears. The man who'd been lost to grief had finally been found, by the only friend who never stopped trying to bring him home. The flickering light from Daniel's flashlight softened as the chamber seemed to exhale. A long, weary breath after decades of silence. Dust settled slowly through the air, sparkling like tiny embers. The German shepherd sat beside him, calm now, no longer tense or alert. Daniel reached out, his rough, battle-worn hand resting on the dog's head. "You've done your duty, soldier," he whispered. "You brought me peace." For a moment, neither moved. The silence wasn't haunting anymore. It was gentle, forgiving. The air that once felt suffocating now felt warm, almost alive. Daniel glanced at the two dog tags resting side by side on the dusty table, their metal edges glinting faintly in the light. Rex and Rex 2, the past and the present. One story coming full circle. A faint breeze brushed through the broken cracks of the mansion's walls, stirring the candle flame. Daniel looked around, and for a brief second he saw him. Rex, his old canine partner, standing in the doorway, tail wagging slowly. His form shimmered, translucent, eyes glowing softly with loyalty that had never faded. Daniel blinked back tears. "You stayed with me," he said, his voice trembling. "All these years you never left." The spirit dog stepped closer, then bowed its head once before fading like mist into sunlight. The living shepherd let out a soft whine, pressing its muzzle into Daniel's hand as if echoing the farewell. The candle flickered out, and the mansion grew still again. The haunting weight that had lingered for so long finally lifted, replaced by a peace Daniel hadn't known since the war. He rose slowly, slipping both dog tags into his pocket. "Come on, partner," he said with a faint smile. "Let's go home." The shepherd barked once, low and steady, and together they climbed the stairs, leaving the ghosts of the past behind in the quiet dark. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of gold and lavender. Mist still clung to the trees as Daniel stirred awake on the cracked stone steps of the mansion. His back ached, his jacket damp from the night air, but his mind felt lighter, clearer than it had in years. The German shepherd lay beside him, head resting on its paws, eyes half closed in peaceful rest. For a moment, Daniel thought it had all been a dream. The journal, the letters, the spirit, just another ghost story his weary mind had conjured. But when he reached into his pocket, his fingers brushed against cool metal. 2 dog tags, real, tangible, proof that the night had been more than just a dream. He exhaled slowly, gazing up at the mansion. It looked different now, not menacing, not haunted, just empty. A hollow shell finally freed from its burden. "You can rest now," Daniel murmured. "All of you." The shepherd stood stretching and wagged its tail. Its eyes met his, bright and alive, and Daniel smiled. "You hungry, partner?" he asked softly. The dog barked once, a cheerful sound that broke the long silence of the forest. As they began walking down the overgrown path, Daniel noticed something strange. The mansion behind them had started to fade into the mist, its outline dissolving like smoke in sunlight. By the time he turned for one last look, it was gone. Only the open clearing remained. He stopped for a long moment, hand resting on the shepherd's back. "Guess some stories don't end," he said quietly. "They just find peace." The morning breeze carried his words away as they walked toward the rising sun, man and dog side by side, leaving behind the house that had once held both horror and healing. The war inside Daniel's heart was finally over. Weeks passed, and the chill of October gave way to the soft stillness of winter. The town had started to whisper about the old mansion again, how it had mysteriously vanished from the woods, leaving behind nothing but a clearing and a faint scent of pine. Most people called it a myth, but Daniel Walker knew the truth. Some places disappear only when their stories are finally at peace. He stood now at the gates of the Silver Paw Canine Rescue Center, a place he had once driven past countless times without a second glance. Today he wore a faint smile as the shepherd, Rex 2, trotted proudly beside him, tail wagging. Daniel had volunteered to help train service dogs for veterans like himself, turning his pain into purpose. The other handlers had started calling him Sarge, a title that made him laugh again. For the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by the sound of gunfire or the ghosts of his past. Instead, his days were filled with barks, laughter, and the warm rhythm of life returning to his soul. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the yard, he'd pull out the 2 dog tags he always kept on his keychain, Rex and Rex 2, and run his thumb over the engraved letters. "You saved me twice," he'd whisper. "Once in the field and once when I was lost." The shepherd would look up at him, eyes calm and understanding as if it knew exactly what he meant. Daniel lifted his gaze toward the horizon, where the sunset bled gold across the clouds. "We don't get to choose how our stories end," he said quietly. "But sometimes, We get a second chance to right them right, Rex 2 barked softly. And together they walked toward the light. 2 soldiers, 1 mission, and a legacy of loyalty that would never fade. Some heroes wear uniforms, others just wear fur, Rex 2.